And we are live with our 159th episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on Twitter. Seth, say hi.
As always, hello. Welcome back to another episode. We're excited to have everyone that's involved, especially Neil. It's been a little while since we've had Neil on the show, but we're going to get into some CSP and some other things with Neil. That's been a topic of conversation for him for a while. We'll probably do quick introductions again, Neil, as well, just as we get into it, so people know where you're coming from if they haven't seen previous episodes. Outside of that, I did want to plug KernelCon one last time, or one more time, I guess I should say. KernelCon is happening the end of March. Ken and I will be teaching our secure code review course at KernelCon. So if you are interested, looking for an opportunity to improve your secure code review skills, consider us, but also consider the conference. KernelCon is a great one. Small community conference, and Omaha is a great place to go. Other than that, Ken, are there any other announcements that you wanted to bring up before we jump into some of these news articles and introduce Neil?
No, not really, actually. Nothing that I can really think of. So yeah, I mean, I can kind of discuss. So because I think a lot of people have seen Neil on this podcast or familiar with Neil, but for those that don't know Neil, and also not maybe as familiar with all of our relationships, so Neil is has been traditionally more on and you can correct me and step in and anytime, Neil, but Neil's been more on the engineering side of security typically. So for instance, one thing he was really well known for, came on the podcast to discuss, was implementing CSP at GitHub. GitHub has a very robust CSP, or I was about to say CSP policy, but I'll just say which is a whole other thing. But anyways, content security policy, pretty robust. So he's very knowledgeable there, but also had organized back in the early days of AppSec Cali, had organized that conference, organized the Loco Moco Sec conferences, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but that's not gone. That's still around, just as AppSec Cali is, but that belongs to a different group now.
I don't believe in it.
Yeah, I don't know if Seth had ever heard of that conference.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've been giving Seth crap for years about not having gone to Loco Moco Sec, and
yes.
So if he misses this one, you'll never live it down, Seth. So no pressure.
That is true. Yeah, no pressure.
But yeah, so Neil has a background there. But Neil's worked at Twitter, also alongside Justin Collins. And if you at all live in the Ruby on Rails security landscape, you definitely have used Brakeman before. And Justin and Neil worked on Brakeman and Brakeman Pro. Neil did a lot of design for that. Neil basically has an extensive history in designing security into engineering products, and so we're really excited to have him on. Also, Neil's pretty much the reason that I ended up at GitHub, because when I was looking at what I was going to do next in life, I reached out to Neil, and Neil reassured me it'd be okay for somebody who wanted to go into GitHub, that it was a good place and great place to land, and helped me with that as well. So long history with Neil. We've all been friends for a long time, and just really happy to have you back on, Neil. That's my introduction for Neil. So hopefully it's complete.
That was very kind.
Yeah. Did we miss anything, Neil?
That I'm currently unemployed. I left GitHub last year. And yeah, Ken, GitHub was very lucky to have you. I've saw, a lot of your career there, and you did great things. And especially as you transitioned into that manager role, chaotic time. I think you did a great job.
Thank you.
And then just a quick correction. I didn't implement CSP at GitHub. It was 90% done when I got there, but I did do some work on it. I did a fair amount of work on it.
Humble man is always
complete.
Yes.
Yeah. So there was a awesome. .git ignore, and that was it. No.
Well, they did the hard part, the JavaScript thing. arguably that's the only important part that you should focus on. So I just put a little window dressing on what was already there.
Sweet.
But actually, it's been nice because we every time someone tried to implement some widget or that would bypass the CSP or expose us in some way, we had a way to detect that, and that has continued to be instrumental in securing GitHub.
Good old regular expressions, keeping marketing out of code. Specifically, we had a tool that would scan code whenever you would push a PR, and if it had a couple method signatures, which was not static analysis, literally a regular expression, it would just automatically CC our team to give it a second set of eyes. Because CSP was very much self-service at GitHub. I haven't touched the policy for years, but hundreds of developers have, and it was a really good system. I think it might have gone a little bit overboard because there are probably thousands of unique content security policies that github.com could serve, when again, script source is kind of the only thing that matters at this point. But I don't know. It was a good system. I liked it. I don't know if I'd repeat it.
Repeat it. Okay. So now I'm interested, right?
Right?
Because we always refer back, Ken and I, when we're talking XSS and other things, right? The system that's in place there actually, has a lot of advantages to it. So I'm wondering, why is it what spurs you to say you wouldn't do that again?
So in the beginning, it was not so common, but it'd just be this one page needs to make an XHR request to this one service or this one third party. And so we'd only have that allowance for that one page. And it was really easy to do that. But in this world, I think, again, I think only script source is the only thing that matters these days, because CSP is not about preventing exfiltration. CSP is about preventing script execution. So do I really care that we have that concise policy on that one page? If it's our own host, maybe we can just hoist that up into the global policy. So as I was leaving, we were seeing so many, 3 or 4 of these a week. And that would get, someone would have to review it. Someone would have to, thumbs up. We eventually moved to a system that just said, unless you're modifying script source, don't even bother. Sorry, we're using regular expressions. We can't tell. Because we kind of changed that attitude. And then again, I was encouraging people to hoist things up into the general policy so it wouldn't have to be dynamic. And one, that was too much burden on developers for what I now deem little value. Obviously, lots of noise as well for something that's not very valuable. Oh no, I had the biggest point. It's going to come back to me.
We'll just keep going down this path because it's pretty interesting. Because go ahead.
Sorry, before I forget it again, because this is super specific to the Rails world. There's a technology called PJAX, and PJAX is kind of like a way to only render the part of the page that changes, and it's kind of clunky because you're still sending back entire chunks of HTML. There's no smarts in the front end that's doing this. But if the new chunk that's loaded needs to have a different CSP allowance, like I go to the homepage and I click on this thing and that thing needs a new CSP exception, I now have to reload the entire page because the CSP cannot change when the page is loaded. So you could have a couple interactions where you're navigating around PJAX. It's nice and snappy. Everything loads. There's no full page load. And then boom, some arbitrary CSP change forces you to do a full page reload, which can be, pretty heavy in certain situations. So right before I left, our coworker, Zhang, she put together some telemetry on this to see okay, how often is our dynamic policy forcing a full page reload when we could benefit from PJAX instead? And it was something like 80%. It was really bad. There are other reasons why a page can load. For example, you need a new JavaScript file. You need a new CSS file. We have something that's integrated into our asset pipeline to basically detect what is given on a certain page and what needs to be on the next page. And if they don't match, we do a full page reload. Yeah, it was 80% CSP, 10% JavaScript, and then 10% JavaScript and CSS. So CSP arguably made GitHub a lot slower than it could have been.
And speed's a huge factor right now. It's been a focus for since before Nat left. Just to make things really, really speedy is a big focus. So that's interesting. I actually didn't even know that was, first of all, obviously I didn't know that if I didn't know it was an issue, I definitely didn't know that the telemetry had been introduced to find that, but that's pretty crazy. 80%. Wow. That's pretty hefty, man. That's rough.
Maybe it was a mistake.
However, you did prevent not only not only has this policy prevented cross-site scripting, but also it's prevented CSRF, IDOR, like just accidentally,
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, I mean, well, and yeah, maybe we should explain that. Just, I think we've explained it before on the podcast, but for anybody who hadn't heard it, the path portion of a request is tied to the what is it? Wait. I'm sorry. I'm you know what? I mixed those up. I think I'm mixing things up.
CSRF tokens?
I'm thinking of this per form CSRF token. I apologize. Yeah. It's later in the day. I apologize. No, I was thinking of per form CSRF tokens. Never mind.
Which lots of people will say is pointless and not useful. And then there's the other people who are right about how useful they are.
What are the arguments against it?
If I have XSS on your page, it doesn't matter that you have perform CSRF tokens. I can just submit the forms just fine. Which is a pretty good argument, but I have seen it literally stop a few attacks just accidentally. And so you can't say it's worthless. And when you get it for free, why are you arguing against it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no. I mean, yeah. I'm trying to think of like, are there any other arguments against it, or is that the only one? Just
yeah, I think there's like some fear that this complexity is going to break somewhere, but I haven't seen it happen.
Yeah, I haven't seen it happen in the wild.
Some people just think it's like, originally there was like per page CSRF tokens because of, was it Crime or Beast or one of those things where you could sort of exfiltrate parts of the page. So you needed to have we basically XOR the actual CSRF token with a nonce every page load to fix that attack. And so I think a lot of people are like, well, that's going to break things, and it didn't. And then the perform CSRF tokens was the same thing. It was like, we can make this enhancement. It's actually the path and the verb, like the two things together. So that posts and gets are different. And then changes per request as well. And so it's kind of like a why not? Yes, if your framework doesn't have it for free, it would have to be added to it, but you can just copy what Rails did.
Just copy what Rails did. Yeah.
Just read that beautiful language known as Ruby and just accept its beauty into your eyes. You will absorb the magic. You will feel the religious experience of these perform CSRF tokens in your own tongue.
In your own tongue. I don't know. We've been looking at some PHP that's been really, really painful. So I don't know if I can go back, right? I like to learn. No.
I did watch I did catch some of that. I thought it was pretty interesting too. I mean, definitely like, it was entertaining content, and it was good to, like, I don't know. There's no way I would have ever seen it otherwise, basically.
Yeah.
To follow, I mean, and to follow up with that, we actually did end up speaking with the creator of Laravel.io, which is the community page. They're also one of the core contributors to the Laravel framework, which is like Ruby on Rails wannabe, basically for PHP, or very similar. Anyways, they submitted patches for both vulnerabilities, so they fixed both vulnerabilities. I mean, obviously we had some exchange go back and forth, just because originally it took a month to report one of the findings, just totally fluke, accident, life events, all this stuff. Anyways, went back and forth. We're good with them. And anyways, they've got everything patched. And I think what we're going to do going forward, what we've chosen to do going forward is we're going to pick out like whatever we're going to test. We're going to make sure that there's two things. One, that we can contact the maintainers and let them know about the stream ahead of time, and they can be ready for whatever we might identify, because we didn't expect to identify vulnerabilities. That actually just happened. We were just obviously trying to show the process, and then we came across vulnerabilities. The second bit was just having a way to report ahead of time, like looking at their security.md or whatever security.txt, whatever they have available to get that security kind of funnel. So by informing the maintainers, having the security contact info ahead of time, we think we can, try and really make it easy on people, even though it's, it's still going to be looking at code and potentially finding vulnerabilities live. So, yeah. It all ended well, though. So that's I guess the summary of that.
Yeah, it was Yeah, I don't know. There's always lessons learned, right? Like from a process perspective, from a secure code review perspective, like every time that we look at something. But the framework does work, right? That's the whole reason that we do it. Cool. Well, let's see. We're kind of meandering across all these different
on
things.
The Ruby,
topics.
I don't want to get off this Ruby topic for a second because I've been getting crap for my entire career for having programmed and worked on securing Rails and Ruby stuff. And like, I know there's lots of different thoughts, but I still go back to Ruby. I still can't get away from it. I do spend a fair amount of time in Python these days too, but I still love Ruby, and I get why people are frustrated at times about it. I know that in the past it's been really hard to get projects going, and especially if you're not like super familiar with the ecosystem, a lot of stuff that you run into error wise just getting started can be very frustrating. But I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts there on the future of Ruby and how people interact with it?
Well, I definitely know the frustrating experiences you're talking about. I think Nokogiri is a classic. You told me to just run this command, and then I got this like 40-line esoteric error I can't understand. But tell me a framework and language that doesn't have that problem at some level.
Yeah.
So TypeScript. No, just yeah.
I was just playing around with I was going to play with React Native, and the steps to set it up are freaking ridiculous.
Yeah.
So it's just everywhere you go. I think every programming language sucks. But my guess for the future of Ruby is it probably will hang around for a long time, but the job opportunities seem to be less over time. I don't know that that's true, but in my very anecdotal experience looking for new jobs, the JavaScripts are pretty popular these days. The
JavaScripts, yes, they are.
And I'm even talking with like some former coworkers that were like, Rails for life people, but now that they're like prototyping things for other people, they want things in JavaScript because it's easier to hire for that. So I think it'll always be around, but the opportunities are dwindling, and maybe it turns into the next PHP or something. Like it's always there, but it seems to get less and less market share, except for like a few major players, which is very similar to Ruby.
Right. Yeah. Very true.
Shopify,
very
GitHub.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree with you there, Neil. Right? Like from a security tooling perspective, Ruby was pretty hot, especially as Metasploit was up and coming, right? It seemed like there was a lot of people doing things with it. Then they kind of migrated back to Python, and now I'm seeing a lot of stuff come out in Go. JavaScript doesn't have much love in the security community, right? Like there's not a lot there that people are like, hey, let's go program JavaScript or TypeScript or whatever. But I see a lot coming up in Go recently. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, right? Like on your side, like what you've been dealing with personally or professionally?
Well, I was 7 years under one employer. It got me a pretty narrow view of the outside world.
Yeah.
I am talking to some people, and I think this is a model that was at GitHub too, is you have a Rails front end and a Go like API backend. Rails isn't the fastest language, but it's pretty darn usable. Go seems to be, where the heavy lifting tends to happen. And I guess if you're working with Kubernetes, it has to be Go. So I see lots of Go too. And I really like that architecture, like speaking to the good parts of Rails. Obviously it's known for rapid prototyping, moving really quick, lots of implicit magic here and there, which is also one of the things people hate about it. But as long as you can keep the magic in your head and you can speak it fluently, then it's quite convenient and nice. And speaking to the security of it, find me a more secure framework.
By default,
everything is by default. You don't get CSRF protection in a Express app by default or something, if I remember correctly.
No.
And yes, that should be a single page app sort of situation, maybe, but come on.
I mean, you have to use
CSRF protection, the escape by default, the safe APIs that you have to opt out of. That's just the way we do things in Rails, and to do any different seems like you're just making your life more difficult. And maybe at one point your application gets too big for Rails and you need to think about it again. But
yeah,
I think GitHub and Shopify are kind of proving that you don't need to.
True. Well, and I mean, I know we've had this discussion of the one true framework, right? Like over the past, few years as far as what's most secure out of the box. And I'd have a hard time arguing with that. Right. Even dealing with, things like Django, Flask, especially on the, JavaScript side of things, trying to get even something as simple as header set, right? The proper, CSP, right? Like a configuration there pushed out and actually working is so difficult in a lot of these frameworks. Whereas, yeah, I mean, Rails by default is, is probably the most secure out of the box. I don't know though. Like I know there would be some people that would argue that, right? But I don't know if there's anything that's as popular that would have those same sorts of features.
Well, let's not exclude Rails as past either.
Yeah,
I think actually one of the earliest communications I had with Ken, which by the way, after we had all worked together at Fishnet,
yeah.
but I connected with Ken a little bit later with the Rails apocalypse of 2013, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Where it was every week there was a new RCE because someone wanted to load YAML inside of JSON for their API and have it auto-serialized in an unsafe manner. Because that's what you want to do with your web framework, of course. So it's had its problems, and it has good SQL injection protection, but there have been lots of SQL injection problems as well. Justin Collins has that railsqli.org page that pretty well outlines them, and Brakeman will help you do things a lot more safely too, which is another huge benefit of using Rails is that it has Brakeman, or that Brakeman has Rails, whatever. Just so many ways.
I always try to explain that.
Guardrails.
That the more opinionated and specific a framework is laid out and follows a specific flow, the easier it is always to do that analysis. And I think Rails proves that. In fact, Laravel, what we were looking at, because it's so similar in that pretty opinionated, very Rails-esque nature, I'm certain it would be an easy tool to write. I don't want to say easy to make it sound trivial, but it would be easier to do, high confidence static analysis with something like that than, Express, to your point, is very piecemeal, right? It's kind of like Pyramid or Sinatra. It's just very here's the middleware, then you have to bolt everything else on top of it, and it doesn't usually end well from every assessment I've ever done on a Node.js/Express application. What are the good frameworks? Does anybody else know because I've heard of I think Restify, maybe, is that a thing? Restify for Node?
For Node? For JavaScript?
Next is something I've seen come up a few times.
Next, somebody had, I'm not sure what the big new Node.js, because most of what I see is Express, and that's because of, like you said, I work at one place, so I have worked there for over 4 years. I only see one type of Node application coming across, so. But I feel like
it's kind of a weird feeling, though, right? I think, earlier in my career, I definitely did a lot more job hopping. So it wasn't like I got so narrow, and I did a little bit of consulting that got me some variety, throughout the week. But yeah, it's coming out into this new world. I feel like, what are all the cool kids doing these days?
It's still horrible. Everything's still horrible. Don't worry, Neil. It's all terrible and horrible.
It hasn't changed. Yeah, we just keep bolting things on top, right? That's.
Well, I guess in one sense, things have changed in the last 7 to 10 years or whatever. It's been 10 years since I did a pure engineering role that wasn't related to security in any way, and I got a lot of opportunity to engineer as a security person, but it was still maybe 50% of that time overall. Mm-hmm. And I feel security hasn't really changed that much. We're still using Burp. Burp's still it's wonderful aesthetic. We're doing the Kubernetes now these days, and the clouds these days, and that stuff. It's not really interesting to me because it's a little too far away from writing code that someone will see. So that's kind of why I'm 95% certain I'm moving back into an engineering role that's not into security, because I look at the advancements in development in the last 10 years, and I feel there has been significant advancements. Frameworks are a lot better. managing dependencies is actually like something you can do. Like you have GitHub Actions. It gives you free CI. That's pretty darn awesome. You have, you know, all sorts of ways. You have a package registry. You can have your own custom package. You can actually manage things instead of just like installing things from people's laptops. Things like hermetic builds like are on the horizon. And sort of these things all really excite me. You have things like code spaces, making development so much easier instead of saying it works on my machine. You have Copilot that saves you so much boilerplate. Like even though Rails is very terse, it's still so nice to write Rails with Copilot because it's like it knows what I want to do.
I will say over the weekend, not to just distract from the topic, but I did work with Copilot this weekend because I was writing some Python code for fun. And man, it was amazing. Like it actually was a great experience. It knew really like, and I'm not saying this because I work for GitHub still, I'm not saying it because of that. I actually was like, well, let me try it out. And I was really surprised at how much easier it made my life. Like just simple things. Also just like some of the error catching boilerplate stuff, like just if else statements, just everything was just really easy to use. Anyways, I had a really good experience this weekend with it.
Seth,
I tried it before and it wasn't very good. So
well, we got access to version 1, and version 1 is a little rough.
Well, and that's I actually haven't I just started pulling it up, right? Because we've got some stuff that we're trying to do Python wise, and it could be an interesting. I'll get back with you on that, right? Like as far as how it can help, and especially on like the JavaScript side, when we're doing front end development, right? That's not an area that I consider any sort of like expertise on my side, right? Like, trying to figure out how React is doing something and then banging my head against a wall is a pretty common occurrence for me, right? So
I think it's going to help out.
Yeah, it could very well. It's just one of those, I hadn't thought about it, right? Since this is the first time it's come up, honestly, for me in 6 months or so, and my initial stabs at it, or my initial impressions of it, were not great, right? Like that was, but I think that's probably been streamlined, or the different versions have come out since then. So we'll see, right?
So I think you really hit the nail on the head right there, because a lot of people thought when you say Copilot, it's like, oh, it's just going to write your code for you. It's going to take our jobs. Like, no. But what it will do is, let's say you're trying to learn something like Sorbet, which is a typing system for Ruby, and you got this weird kind of syntax that you don't understand, and then you start typing, and then it suggests something, and it's 80% correct, and you're like, oh, I just need to change that string to an integer or something, and now I know how to use Sorbet, and it took me like an hour before I was like, okay, I can now write this without Copilot if I needed to, but why would I?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, if it's anything just like, the predictive text that pops up in Visual Studio or anything else nowadays, right? Or that did previously, makes my job faster, I'm all for it, right? Like being able to streamline development is huge, right? I still wonder how Copilot does with some of the security snippets and other things like that. It'll be interesting.
Don't worry about that stuff anymore.
Oh, we don't. That's why we have CSP, right? Right. That takes care of everything. Neil, is that what? That's what I understood, right?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if this is. I don't know. I don't want to possibly venture into something that's not public. But Ken and I were involved in Copilot from practically day one, and I'm pretty happy with where we ended up with it. Both in the design and privacy preserving ways, but as well as the abuse detection and things like that. Now we don't have access to open AI servers, so, but they did. There are some assurances there.
Good.
And as another point that you reminded me of, again, Copilot isn't to tell you how to write code, but it saves you so many keystrokes with all that boilerplate that even again in Rails, it's just like out there in 1 second.
Which I think that was your point originally, is that because like being a developer now, being an engineer now, has just so many more tools to make your life more happy, more productive, easier to get up to speed, like you said, on something you may not be super up to speed with, more more visibility on and security implemented into package distribution ecosystems. To your point, you can write code, you push code, deploy code, create libraries and deploy those all from like really one place. There's tons of libraries that you can include into your application to do whatever thing, security or not, you want to do. But I am curious, what sort of was the impetus for you to say, hey, I want to take a step back from building, engineering security into products, and I want to just focus on, engineering. What kind of triggered that for you?
So deep down at heart, I consider myself an engineer who has done security, and rather than the other way around, as a security person who can do engineering. Like I started off as an engineer originally, and I've gone back and forth between security multiple times. It's just really, I deep down inside, I think I want to be engineering, but the security work has been so, attractive for a bunch of reasons. Obviously, the money is nice. The being a part of a niche skill sort of thing that's hopefully becoming more and more common was fun. I definitely enjoyed, meeting people like you in the community. There's a strong Twitter presence, which I am quite obnoxious on Twitter, and I'm glad that I can talk to people still. So it's just, and GitHub, when I started there, the responsibilities were kind of too broad for my taste, and then we split off into like an AppSec team, and AppSec became ProdSec. I think that was kind of like my favorite time working at GitHub, because I was writing code for the application 100% of the time for like 3 straight years, and I got the opportunity to do that, and I really, really, really enjoyed that time. Through that time, we pretty much eliminated all automated account takeovers that were just happening at a rate that was just so scary for us. But then the work kind of like evolved into like the architecture reviews, and there was a little bit less engineering going on. And then over time, the authentication team split off and took over all that work that I really enjoyed doing. And then I sort of, realizing I think I was burnt out like a year ago. But then the opportunity to move into management came up, and while I had, passed on that in other opportunities, I was like, well, maybe this is what's going to make me excited about working at GitHub again, which probably isn't the most wise thing looking back.
So like having a baby to keep a relationship going, kind of thing.
I think that's a direct relation between those two events. Yes, mentality is not very wise.
For sure, but not. I mean, to be fair, I thought, frankly, just knowing your natural ability to understand people, your natural empathy. Honestly, I thought you'd be great in that role. It wasn't a question of like and you were. You're great. It's more. It's this thing of being good at something doesn't mean you want to do it, and that is underappreciated at times. But it's important, because if you're not happy doing, if it's not what you want to do long term, it's never going to work out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I did enjoy lots of it. Hired 2 people, and by the time I left, one of them was ready to lead projects. I promoted 2 people. I really helped some people sort of gain some comfortableness, like in this. Frankly, it was a little bit tumultuous with all the change that was going on in the last year or so, and the pandemic, like that's kind of a problem too.
Yeah.
So it was definitely like a bit stressful in that regard. But I think what happened towards the very end is it was like, okay, I was going to switch back to an engineering role, and we were hiring my replacement. And then it was kind of like, well, do I even want to go back to that engineering role, which can be doing a lot of architecture reviews? I said, well, I wasn't so sure, and I kind of flip-flopped back and forth, and then kind of like came to the realization, it was like, it's just time to go. Like I need to start something new. And then like a week later, somebody hit my inbox with an opportunity, and I was like, what the heck, I'll take a look at it. They gave me their coding challenge, and I was just like, oh my God, I haven't written code in so long, and this feels so good. I think I need to do this some more. And my last like flip-flops between security and engineering, like, I don't know, the engineering role only lasts like a year or so, and then I'm back into security. So who knows, maybe I'll just be back in another year. But for the time being, and hopefully for the long term, like I'm going to step away from the security space. Maybe an engineering role in a security product, but definitely not a security role. And I'm definitely not going to become the de facto, like, hey, you're the security guy of the company. Like, no, you can hire a security guy or security person, I'm sorry, and I will help you hire that person, but that's not me.
Yeah.
Now I will build things securely. I will present my ideas in a way that I believe are secured because I have had experience, but don't ask me to review some project. Don't ask me to respond to a bug bounty, and don't call me because somebody tweeted about an XSS in our product.
I think there is this tendency to say like okay, so now you've done this thing. And so now that's your career trajectory. When in reality, we're all like we have different parts of our lives where we're living different ways, I mean, from your sleep schedule being changed to your interests being different to how much capacity you have for work, all these things change. They evolve. Like you said, technology changes and that can shift your interest too. And it's sort of weird to think that there's like this one static trajectory you can go. And in reality, like that's, we're human beings that have multi-faceted skill sets. We're not just like this one thing we can do. So I like the idea of trying out different things and not being so rigid about, this is the one track I have to go on. I also think when you do go into a role and you've moved around a bit and you've done a little bit of engineering, you've done a little bit of security focused engineering, you've done some management, you bring to the table much more in all of those experiences than somebody who kind of was just maybe on one track. So anyways, I don't think it's a negative thing. I think it's something we should be more accepting of and people should do more of. Like I have definitely gone myself back and forth on all sides of that as well. So yeah, I mean, I'm of course going to be a proponent of that since I've lived that. So
yeah, I mean, honestly, like Neil, I remember you coming into Fishnet, right, back in the day, and having a discussion with you as you're like, no, this isn't for me, right? Like I want to go do like security engineering or like more engineering efforts. And it was the first time that I'd really started to think about exactly what you're saying here, this switch between, hey, it's okay for me to go choose a different path if what I'm currently doing doesn't fit, right? And Ken and I have both experienced this on like helping run a small consultancy and having to split off because it just didn't work anymore, and you become like, and that doesn't mean that a year before it didn't work. It just means at that time, hey, okay, it's time to reassess. Maybe you're just burnt out on it. Maybe it doesn't bring you the same joy that it did. And that's okay, right? We do have a tendency to classify people into certain niches, right? Because we've seen them only in that space and not realize that they're a complete person, just like each of us is as well. So, trying to give people that empathy and that ability to grow is always difficult. And I think that from a management perspective is very difficult, or from a business perspective is very difficult to accommodate people in that way, right? To allow people to move between roles or between groups. I mean, in your case, it sounds like you've decided to just move on completely. But like, is that mainly because you just wanted to see something new, right? It's time for you personally to see something new. Or is it just I guess I'm just kind of interested on what spurred that discussion outside of you're stepping away from the management role.
Well, it's complicated, of course.
I'm sure it is, right? Like, I mean, that's why it's interesting, right?
I think, specific to me, I'm very fortunate to have the ability to do this, and not just because I can write code, but, that I could take time off to think about what I wanted to do next and to like really make sure that I wanted to make this switch is a luxury that lots of people do not have. Yeah. So, and then at the same time, it's a little scary going back. I'm not going to lie. I probably have to fight some imposter syndrome at the beginning when, I sit here saying I can do Rails in my sleep, and then I get to a problem I can't solve, and I'm, not be prideful and obviously reach out for help. But, it's a little scary to switch into a new realm. And I think that can prevent a lot of people from making the leap. And, staying with what's comfortable, especially in security, tends to pay well. I'm not surprised that people don't go this direction very often.
Yeah. Comfortability can be its own trap. You know?
Yeah. That's okay. They'll just tag you as security champion wherever you end up, and you know.
Well, I will say that I know
they definitely will.
Yeah.
I know I've tweeted about this a couple of times actually. Like the people who know me, the people who have worked directly with me in the past, the people who maybe have seen some of the work I've done or maybe worked with me on something, they're all like, yeah, I don't care. Like you can be an engineer here. That's totally fine. We will never ask you a security question. And the people who don't know me are like, who's this guy? Is he really, can he really code? I think we're gonna do a live coding exercise. I don't trust this person. It's like, what? Like I don't want to like try to do this like with humility, but like look at my resume. Like if you don't think I can write your stupid little code challenge and I'm gonna like someone else do it, like what is wrong with like we're done.
Yeah.
So one company did say they wanted to do live coding challenge. They didn't say it was like out of untrustworthy or anything, but I told them I'm not like it's got to be a take-home exercise. I've got to be able to do this on my own time without someone breathing down my over my shoulder, and hopefully you can accommodate. So we'll see what they say.
Yeah, that's yeah. I've never liked those live interview. Probably the worst one I ever had was in Uber. They flew me out to California, and I was exhausted, and I didn't honestly want to even be there. I was just entertaining the interview for a friend at the time, which was another lesson learned. Don't do that. And it was a round robin, and people had like one person got into an accident that day, so they were switching out other people. So by the time I actually got in there and the schedule had all been jumbled around and all the people, it was so jarring. And then it was like, here's a laptop that is not at all like, doesn't have your setup on it. Go ahead and just code in this little terminal in front of me. And also I'm just going to sit right next to you. And I'm just like, and then it was like,
but you can ask me questions. We can collaborate on this, but I'm never going to give you the answer you want or be actually helpful.
Right.
And you don't have access to Google.
So bad. Yeah. It was so bad. It was terrible. It's not a way I would ever interview people. I really like the idea of a take home that is then analyzed later. I just think, because who is getting hired and they're like, actually, I don't know how to program, so I'm just going to go dark and you're not going to see any results, even though I did really stellar on my interview. Like, why? Like, what? When does that happen?
I have a resume that shows experience.
And then the experience and references and a resume. Yeah, all that stuff. It doesn't make any sense, but all right.
Yeah, that's funny because the company that is, I think, being the most difficult with me, I was referred by someone who works there, and I know two of the people that work there, but I don't know. It's tough nut breaking through this recruiter.
Yeah.
They're just they're just not sure about you, Neil. Not sure about you.
I went through this actually before I took the management role. I was considering being a first security hire at a medium-sized startup. Like I know the first security hire thing is kind of like a joke, but I do think it was about the right time. It wasn't too late. A little bit late, but not too late. Yeah, they had me code in a web browser. And that was ridiculous. And, one of the feedback was like, there were no tests. And I was like, I didn't know I could add multiple files to this web browser thing. Like, that's why I was writing it in the style I was writing it in, so that I could verify that this chunk of code worked. I didn't know you wanted a gem out of it. And so they came back and said, oh, okay, well, we'll give you a second chance. You could do a take-home interview. And at that point, I was just,
you're like, no, look, I just interviewed you, and from your program management, you did not define the specs or the exit criteria, so I'm not interested in this job because you failed my test. So
and my pair programming partner was not very helpful. If anything, made it worse.
Yeah,
interviewing's hard though. It's the least perfect science, and unfortunately, there is a lot of like who sort of going on, which is not fair, like in any way, but. I mean, maybe I'm too old for this shit, but I'm just going to go with like probably the easiest interview process that just company.
Yeah, I do feel like there is room for at a certain point, if you've been doing this long enough and your work's public and your experience, you got reference. It's like, why do we have
source
to go
software contributions, things like that?
Yeah, it's like it's out there. I honestly, I think I would have a hard time going through a rigorous interview process right now too. Like I'll be turning 40 not too far off in the near future. And I'm just like, am I at this point in my life where I'm like ever going to, if I was to leave my current roles, go and do some interview process. That's really, I could tell you if someone sat next to me and is like, okay, program in front of me, be like, all right, never mind. I don't need this job. Like, I don't want it. So, and that's not to be like, I'm so awesome. That's like, I'm just too old for this shit. Like, it's just, I don't want to, anyways.
I know some people who won't do any coding exercises at this point because they're just like, look at my resume. Like, that should be enough.
Yeah, right.
And then again, like, these coding challenges are not hard. Like, I think if they were a lot harder, I would feel like better about doing them. And because it maybe would be a better demonstration, but not live.
Yeah. Not live. No. Yeah. When you have a specific set of requirements and they give you like adequate time, and then that's something that's interesting. But yeah, sorry, Seth, I interrupted. What were you saying?
No, yeah, like I'm just trying to think about it from a recruiter or a company perspective on what's going through their heads, right? As far as like, how do we evaluate someone? And I don't know. It seems like large organizations that have a large recruiting effort, right, start to stumble onto, oh, well, we heard that Microsoft did like these coding challenges, X, Y, and Z, so you should be able to do them. And if you don't, then you can't get our senior title, right? Like it seems to be this like little barrier to entry that they can drop in there, as opposed to, wow, this was referred by another senior that we currently got on our team that we really like. So maybe we need to think about this a little bit, right? Like I've had scenarios just like you were saying when I was starting out in my career, sat down, I'm going for a security position, and they're asking me to code something, and like and I'm like, okay, that's great, but this is not the job that I'm going for. So what is it that you're trying to get out of this? But even asking them the question didn't go with it. Code comprehension. So Brian Gray brought this up in the comments. It's a demonstration of code comprehension of existing examples realistic during an interview, spotting errors, etc.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that would be easier, right? Like a kind of a code review, recognizing what issues, what's actually going on. I could talk
about the way we do it.
Yeah. I mean, is that something that you do, is code snippets?
Yeah. So there's two parts to the way we do it for our apps. Well, I mean, they're technically called the assessment team. You probably call them AppSec team somewhere else. So because the job is like testing, right? That's what it is. Looking for security vulns. There's two separate tests. One is a screening exercise that is just code snippets, and you have to determine out of that like what's vulnerable, if anything, and then write that up. And by the way, it's all asynchronous. You have time to look at it. It's on, and it's not a huge code snippet either. The second follow-up is a actual vulnerable web application. We give you specific time requirements. We give you, to Neil's point, you'll have like a code spaces set up so that it can just, as soon as you launch it, the application can just run, and you've got the code there to review as well. So that's nice. And then, but in there, we've got some vulnerabilities. Some are, stuff that could be found by tooling specifically, because, we do expect you're probably going to run some tooling. And then there's some stuff that's a little bit more nuanced and not easy to find with tooling. And that's also purposeful. But the point is once you start that sort of assessment, you have 3 to 4 hours to complete it, is what we ask of you. That's just what we just ask you to cap it at that, because we don't want people to spend crazy amounts of time. But also, if you were to spend a crazy amount of time, you'd kind of skew the bell curve there. The other thing too is, once you kick it off, you have 48 hours to actually like complete it. So you've got 2 full days to go through it. If you need an extension, obviously we can always do that, but that's the default. So it gives you time. We don't watch you do it. You just submit a pull request when you're done that has your fixes, your markdown file describing the issues and things like that.
I mean, I would argue that's much more important, showing that you can use GitHub and you can communicate changes and you can obviously find them. But I don't know that the rest of it was super important.
Yeah. Well, that's just it. Like
it's hard to get things fixed if you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry. There's, by the way, I should explain on my end, there's a little delay. So I don't know when y'all are talking sometimes. So my apologies for all the interrupting. That's why.
Yeah. So Neil and I, we'll just be quiet and let Ken go. Okay. But
sorry.
No, you're fine. No, I was gonna, to your point, to both your points, right? Like, I was going to say that the fit often, like in my experience, the technical abilities, there's kind of that bar of, all right, do you recognize the concepts? Do you have like the background that we need? And if we're interviewing you, you should probably already have that background. That should be what we looked at in the resume. We should have gone to your GitHub account, right, and looked to see what you're involved with before we actually decided to bring you on board. But from there, it becomes more about fit to me, right, than, hey, can you solve this problem within 2 hours or even 4 hours, right? Are you someone that I want to work with? Becomes a lot more important in my mind than, hey, what are these like random gates that we've just put out there?
Yeah, that's very true. It has been 7 years since I've really interviewed, and yeah, there's definitely a much bigger focus in my experience about just like getting to know the person.
Really,
not so much that like the beer test, I think is some way that people phrase it, but it's like tell me about the things that might not be considered good about you. Like where do you land on this spectrum of like one example I gave was like, where does this company land on order to chaos? Because I'm a little bit more on the order side. And the guy was just like, thank you. I'm also a little bit more on the order side. I don't believe in bureaucracy, but I believe in, lots of things. And if people don't take their project boards, it kind of, bothers me a little bit. So I might do it for them. But the beer test, but also the culture test and making sure that, like we'll work the same way. Like some companies, they want you like on Zoom all day and available in chat like all day. And I'm like, no, it's not going to work for me. I'm going to have long blocks of time where I can just sort of disconnect. I'm always available via Slack, but I really need to have like a distraction-free zone to like work. And like some companies are like, well, I don't know, it used to be play video games or something, ignoring the fact that I still produced all the work that they asked. And then other people are like, you're an adult, work the hours you want to work. Get done what you say you want to get done. It's really that easy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I go back and forth, right? Because right now in a consulting role, I see like these just like huge differences between organizations, right? Working with one organization and there's, the security team and they're like, hey, schedule a meeting with me. So I pull up their calendar and there's literally no break in their day for the next week and a half. And I'm like, how do you guys get anything done? Right? Like, I don't like, this is why you're constantly behind on everything.
They don't.
Exactly. Well, that's what he told me. He's like, I don't. Right. And I'm like, so why are you working there? Right. Like this is obviously a cultural problem. It's not it's not a you problem. If your calendar is this full and you're expected to do this and not actually produce anything, even in a management role, I would argue it's a waste. Right. But then on the flip side, you've seen those completely chaotic organizations where they don't even know who their manager is, right? And it's interesting to deal with companies on both sides of that, right? Coming in as a third party, because I definitely have, the favorites that I like to work with. And when they're more structured, it goes a little bit easier. But then sometimes the bureaucracy is a huge pain to work with because they'll only accept X, Y, and Z, and it has to be formatted specifically and And there's a happy medium there, I think, for each of us, right? We have a tendency to swing one way or another depending on what our own needs are, right? But yeah, I don't understand people staying in an environment where they obviously aren't happy, right? Going back to what we were talking about before.
One thing
maybe
I want to hear
that pays for all their needs.
Yeah, the paycheck. Yeah. Go ahead, Ken. Sorry.
I know. No. I just know, and again, I cannot stress enough. I am getting the weirdest delay, so I don't know always when y'all are talking until seconds after. Anyways, Neil, I am curious though, because you've mentioned multiple times, you're a fan of the startup sort of culture and business model. What aspects of the startup culture, the startup sort of business model are most appealing to you, and what are the things that are not as appealing to you, if any?
So the appealing things are Mountain Dew and foosball tables.
Yay!
No, that's another thing I think I could mention too, is like the startup scene seems to have changed dramatically too. I've worked at like a startup that had like 8 engineers, and it was a moderate like work hard, play hard sort of deal. Like we were pretty strict about like not working after hours, but things had to be done on weekends from time to time.
Sure.
But we were 5 engineers crammed into a single office, and I brought my own laptop, and it was
personal.
Yeah, because they want to save the company some money. And that was a great experience, and I really enjoyed working there, and I really enjoyed the people I was working with, and actually some of the people I'm talking to right now. But that was probably a rarity for something back then, because I think the majority of the startups were like, all right, everyone's going to move to this house. Nobody's going to shower. We're not going to have any respectable sleep schedules, and you're expected to work, as hard as we need you to, kind of like the Silicon Valley, like stereotype gone wrong. Now it's like everyone I'm talking to, it's like, yeah, you have a family, and they should be first, and you have things you enjoy, and you should put those above work. And that's just so awesome. I don't think you're going to get that at major companies. I don't think you're going to get that out of Google, for example. So the ability to kind of just like trust people to be adults is something I really like about startups. The sort of like being able to move very quickly and have large impact with small amounts of effort is very attractive. At GitHub, doing new things takes a lot of work, and it should, because of GitHub's stage. But at the startup stage, you're a little more move fast and break things, I guess, approach. I don't really like that phrase, but it's
one
a
of
little
our
more
first
interactions
was deploying to production, but to you showing me how to deploy to production, but just so we could update some docs. So literally pushing the GitHub.com site just to update some docs for no other reason than they were just lived in that repo. But anyways,
and I believe during that time also you could only deploy one pull request at a time. So
yes,
nowadays you have the ability to batch them up, and there would be a queue. So, and the deploy process back then took like a half an hour. So yeah, Ken ate up the deploy queue for a half an hour to make it change to non-public facing docs. The docs eventually got moved outside of that repo.
Eventually. But yeah, you can move fast and break things, like you said. So
yeah, and everyone knows everyone's name. Everyone knows everyone's kids' names or dogs' names or things like that, and it's a lot more personal. I think GitHub was always, since we're a remote first company, it put a lot of emphasis into like the experience of like the individual, and making sure like that we recognize like what makes them happy, and we're not like you need to be 9 to 5 in the seat. Not that you can't get that at other companies as well, but I just see like the smaller company, the startups that, when you're interviewing with them, they tell you about the company culture like that. It's just becoming like the norm from what I see. And that's just so awesome, because I didn't think a company like GitHub could exist until I worked there. And now it's like, now I have faith that I can get that experience somewhere else. Because I definitely did feel at one point like I can't get this anywhere else, so I can never leave this company.
I mean, I do think that they've proven that you can treat people well. You can make things, like you said, you can make things really great for the individual, for the teams that they work on, but also have a great bottom line. You can make money. You can still be a great business and accomplish, not working people to death. And like it's really hard to strike that. I mean, it really is hard to strike that balance. I don't know. Like, one thing I've thought about, I'd be curious about your opinion, is that I think one of the reasons that worked is because a lot of the people that I've come across, or especially originally in the early days, they were very experienced already. They had already worked at other places, seen what went wrong. Like, honestly, when I was talking to somebody recently, I was like, when I went to InDoc class, I was like, yeah, well, I was a CTO. So, I mean, I'm kind of, I was like, I feel like I'm pretty confident going to this InDoc class. And this is when InDoc classes were in person. And I get in there and everybody's like had been like a CEO or a CTO, or had been like the top lawyer at their firm, or was like a partner at their firm, or whatever. They were all really good at their jobs and very experienced, and all of them brought that into the environment to make it better. And I think like because contrast that against like the life at Living Social, where it was like, not that I'm trying to be ageist, but it does factor into experience when everybody there is like 22 years old, right? I mean, like that's going to play a part in how and it did play a part in how the company's trajectory, ends up landing. So anyways, like, I'm curious, what are the factors you think make good people? I mean, besides like experience, like what are the factors that make like a company full of good folks?
Well, speaking to the age thing, the reason you saw that at GitHub is because I think by the time you were hired, we were still only hiring senior people. There wasn't a single junior person at the company until probably like 3-4 years ago. So yeah, you had maturity there. And GitHub's from day one, always part of the interview process was like the culture thing. Like at GitHub, we support a lot of lifestyles, and we do not like discriminate at all. And if you have any problem against any class of person, don't work here. And if you ever like exhibit any sort of thing towards any class of person, you won't work here. They were very clear about that. And I think like I'm phrasing it in a tone that sounds a little more dramatic. It's not, so that's not how the interview is, but that was the point of it, is like, we don't want any shitheads here. And like, we don't tolerate that. And some got through, of course, and some got fired. And GitHub also had a little bit of a problem in its history with
I can't remember.
I don't know what you're talking about. There was like an incident where it was very public and it did not make GitHub look very good. So no culture process is perfect, and
right.
Bad things are going to happen. But at least we put up like some sort of bar there. At least after that incident, I know for sure it was very, very like, this is what we're about. And it's not like we assume that people are going to be, not racist. We actually like tell them like, you cannot be racist here.
And or sexist or anything else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like GitHub supports transgender rights more than any company I've ever seen in the past. But now I think that's becoming normal. And if you have a problem with that style, that's your problem, not ours.
Mm-hmm.
I to your point, I think that is like, in terms of supporting marginalized people, like definitely, I wouldn't say it's even just startups in general. I feel like it's a trend that's a positive trend that's been set more broadly than even just like startups, which is where I would expect it to originate, as a startup style environment. But I think it's, in a good way, it's gone and spread elsewhere to like enterprises and big businesses as well. So thumbs up there. But
we have lots of articles coming out that just say happy employers are more effective. Happy employees tend to stick around. If you have empathy towards your employees, they will have more respect for you. If it's crazy. No one ever thought of this before, but the previous generation, like my dad's generation was like, employees are interchangeable. You're lucky to have this job. Screw you. And that's just terrible in every way.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, we're definitely dealing with the great resignation, as they're calling it right now. We're definitely dealing with that. And I say we, not as a, so there, I think you were, man, I think you were a part of the AppSec Council's meetings, but anyways, went to one of the AppSec Council meetings, which, is like all the big tech, security folks from all the big tech, a lot of us either probably been on this podcast, right? So we're having the council meeting and everybody's dealing with the same thing. And then we're not even just from like security, we're talking about from all departments in every business. And it's a huge, attrition is a big issue for literally everyone right now. I think maybe, who knows? I could ponder all day. We tried to ponder on why, we figure maybe the pandemic's giving people more time to reflect. And, just slowing things down and looking at like, hey, is this what's best for me and things like that. But in any case, we're all dealing with it. So I think like to your point, it's even more competitive. Something that was already competitive has become incredibly competitive. So if you are not doing your best to make people happy, good luck hiring, really.
Yeah, good luck hiring without a 401k match. Good luck hiring without like an HSA and a PPO. Like good luck hiring without unlimited time off, but like actual unlimited time off, and not the like we're going to guilt you for taking time off. Because if you don't have those things, like I'm not even gonna look at you. Yeah,
I think it's important with unlimited PTO. To your point, this is what I've learned over the last year, to do quarterly, if not monthly monitoring of it to enforce minimums. And I mean that. And like, for instance, this Friday, I'm taking the day off, not because I have to, but because in having conversations with people, they're like, well, if you're a manager, you need to set the example. So if you like, my son's got the day off Friday, so I'm going to take that day off. And so I think between mandatory minimums, maybe monthly or quarterly tracking, and then like, maybe setting an example as well. If you're a manager, that's the way to really, to truly work unlimited PTO, the correct amount of a correct way. And as you know, our baseline minimum is 25 business days. That's what we shoot for as a minimum. So
yeah, I don't know that that's super common yet, but
the
unlimited PTO definitely is. But yeah, to your point, same thing. Almost every single one-on-one I would have, I'd be telling people to take time off. And I think I really came to appreciate time off a few years ago at GitHub when, I think Patrick Toomey became my manager, and he was very big proponent on taking time off, would always encourage it. And then just sort of one year, I wasn't taking a lot of time off, maybe taking like a week or two off, and it was getting towards the end of the year. And it was just like, I'm just not going to come here for like the rest of the year. And he's like, go for it. And it ended up being like 35 days off. And then I even like tweeted about it, and, he favorited it or retweeted it or replied like, good job or something. Like he 100% believes in the minimum vacation policy, and that people should take, again, it's a minimum vacation policy. Take more.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't, if you don't have the ability to give that vacation to people, and you can't survive without them, I'd argue you're not setting yourself up well. You don't have redundancy in place, and you probably are just short staffed, and you need to hire more people, which is, I know, hard right now, which is the point, but So going back to the original question though, so I would say one of the things I gleaned from what you said is setting up a business early with maturity. So people that have both operational experience and maturity, but also like the maturity to, not allow any ists into the organization, set reasonable expectations, have, policies like 401k matching, unlimited PTO, things like that. Anything else you want to, kind of cover there that you think might be helpful?
I've seen a few companies straight up publish their, I guess you'd call them like their core values. And I think that's been really helpful. Not that like the absence of that is a bad thing, but if I see that on your like hiring page and you list all those things, and you really emphasize that it's a healthy culture, that it's great work-life balance, and like you really like hammer onto those points, like I actually believe you when you say that, and that's a good sign. So again, the lack of it's not going to stop me from talking to you, but if I'm like interested in you and I see that, I'm probably going to apply. Because it's at this point, like culture is the most important thing to me, not the technology, not the product, not the pay. Like I just want to work in a place of happy people who like being where they are and enjoy the things they do, and want to be there for another 5 to 7 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
That institutional knowledge, being around year after year.
Yeah.
Sorry, Seth. Once again,
No.
I didn't see it until after I started. Sorry, I'm going to shut up. You go ahead.
No, I find it interesting, right? Like coming from at this point, like a small consultancy, right? Thinking about the structure of, employment and, keeping people happy and, making sure that that the resources that are available, like that, the people that trust basically in me at this point, right, are taken care of, right? And, we've all been in situations where that doesn't actually happen. And, it's not that it's difficult to set that stuff up, but I do like, it is something that every like couple of months, as somebody that's trying to run a small company like that, it's something that I have to go back to, right? Like it's, hey, yeah, like I need my employees to go take a break, right? For sure. And I'm more focused on that. But then at times I'll find that means that I'm not. And then I'm getting burned out. And it's like that flip side of, oh crap, right? Like if I don't do those same things, even for myself, like the self-care idea, then like the whole company suffers, or people suffer outside of me, and not just, my family and me and myself in what I'm doing on a daily basis. So I'm trying to balance that and figure out, okay, how do I actually provide that environment, but still make sure that I'm not up stressed every night, right? Like from a finance or a cash flow perspective and everything else that goes into that. I don't know. It's just an interesting thought exercise for me personally, right? To try and figure out what it is what those values actually look like, and how do you communicate those, and how do I put that down on, guess what? I care more about you and your family than I do, hey, I can make $1 this hour if I make you work, right? That's, and it's at times it's hard to communicate, right? But it is valuable, I guess, is where I'm going with that. So
yeah, man, lots of respect to dealing with that. I mean, it's not something I think I could handle very well. So
yeah, I mean,
lots of respect.
There's times, yeah, like, I don't know, trying to like keeping the pipeline going, as they say in the consulting space, right? Like that's always a major concern, and what's coming down, and like, okay, we have salaries, how much of a cash flow, or how much of a pad do we need to make sure that we're going to be okay, right? Like, and I definitely err on the side of probably too much, on the padding side. I know there's other ways that you can make money, and you can stream people, but then also taking care of customer. Anyway, right? Like I'm getting into like the nuances of trying to run a small business, and we can discuss that at some other point. Yeah.
At least you get Q4 to relax.
Oh yeah, Q1.
No, you get Q1 to stress over your Q2 and Q3 pipeline.
Yeah, you get Q4. You get all maxed out. You hit January 1st. You're like, this is great. And then 2 weeks later, you're like, oh shit, what does my pipeline look like? And where's money coming from? And then I bring in other people, and I'm like, okay, help us out, right? Like, yeah. Anyway, so it works. Difficult. Yeah, it's difficult wherever you go. That's basically all I'm trying to say. It's difficult.
You know what? On the flip side, on the other side of that, what's really annoying is when you want to have a good vendor, like a smaller business like yourself, and the procurement process makes that so difficult. And like this is more for enterprises, but I've recently had to deal with that, and it's just like, it's so annoying when you have to make somebody who is a small business go through ridiculous steps to just do an assessment. It's like, can I just pay them some of my money and do this on the side? Can you just like discreetly let me just like, I don't know, just give them the source code and don't get mad at me or sue me or whatever? Like, yeah, it's just, I don't know, man.
Seth, I don't know if you've seen this, but do you hire people out of state or just mostly in state?
So all my hires have been in state, right? Like, so in the state that I work in, so I don't have to worry as much about, but I do have an accountant because
because one thing I'm experiencing, and this is definitely not a broadly known concept, is when you hire someone in a different state, there's some steps you have to take. Obviously things like state income taxes and some business registration are generally required. Doing that in Hawaii is probably one of the most difficult things, if not the most difficult thing. Like getting your first employee in Hawaii is something that makes HR people like grind their teeth, because the process of doing it is just so terrible. So before I was looking for the job and I would get recruiters reaching out to me, the first question is, do you hire remotely, and can you hire in Hawaii? And 3 years ago, the answer was
people out.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that the pandemic has happened, hiring people out of state is more or less normal these days. And some places will say we can only hire in these states. Some places won't post the states they can hire in. So it's been a little, not, I wouldn't say like challenging that it's actually hasn't stopped any conversation yet. But there were a few conversations. It was like, yeah, make sure you can hire in Hawaii before we go through all this.
That's interesting.
I can tell you that we dealt with Seth and I when we were small business consulting, where we had people distributed all over the states. We had to file, since we had a pass through, we had to file state taxes like all over the US, basically.
Yes, yeah.
Like just every state. Like it was, I think they're not even an exaggeration. There's like 11 states or something. We were like submitting taxes to. It's just such a nightmare when you do pass through and you have a remotely distributed company. I wouldn't recommend a pass through if you're doing a widely distributed company. Was my takeaway there.
Yep.
For anybody who's listening that wants to do a small business.
Welcome to the Small Business Podcast.
Yeah, we're
very specific. Yeah, exactly.
Well, this tech podcast started off with a little bit of CSP and then moved right into engineering, hiring, interviewing, business practices.
Hey. Well, welcome to Absolute AppSec.
So
apparently,
CSP.
Yeah.
Back to the original CSP point. Yeah. Oh
no.
Man,
we do want to be cognizant of your time though, Neil. Right? Like we've been going for a good hour 15 at this point. I know it feels like we're just chatting, which we are, right? But yeah. Ken, do you have any sort of a hard stop, or you want to go for a little bit longer?
I got a few more minutes, although I do have some people I got to respond to at work. But I can. Yeah, I'm not in any massive rush, so yeah, we get anything remaining that. Well, I guess two things. One, Seth, do you have any remaining questions? And Neil, any points that you wanted to discuss or anything else you wanted to kind of cover while you were on today?
Well, I definitely don't want to take up more of your time if you guys are busy, but no. I do have plenty of time. I guess I could circle back to kind of what we did talk about CSP, and I can definitely get through this fairly quickly too.
Well, I did want to bring that up because we had that one article we discussed last week, which was the theoretical, like, hey, we're going to defeat CSP, right? And where did I?
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah.
And I'll be right back, guys. I'll be right back.
Yep, you're fine.
Cool.
I'll post it in the comments here. The Hacker Noon. I'm harvesting credit card numbers and passwords from your site, and just a description of the theoretical process that they'd go through to actually put something in npm that allows for scanning. But one of the points that they had in there, I'm looking at the wrong article now, was that they could defeat CSP, right? I'm pulling it up. I'm trying to browse my way down to it. But if you want to jump into it, like the CSP stuff you wanted to talk about, or was it related to this?
Directly related to it.
Okay. Yeah.
So I did mention it earlier on. I said that CSP is about stopping script execution and not about preventing exfiltration. Okay. And that's a lot what this thing is saying. I can't remember the order of things, but it's like, oh, if you forget to set a form action, I'm just going to create a form, because by default, form action does not get a value, does not inherit from default source. And it's like, okay, even if you have a form action, I can just exfiltrate it through XHR, or this, or that, or that. And what they don't say at the very end is, even if you set all of your directives, there's nothing stopping me from just doing a JavaScript redirect to exfiltrate the data. So CSP cannot prevent exfiltration of data. It can make it harder, can limit it a little bit, but it is a fool's errand to actually think that you're going to prevent exfiltration. Again, just by the existence of the ability to perform a redirect on a page. Obviously, that requires script execution, but I think that's what's assumed in this case. And there was a proposal to add a redirect to source directive, but that never went anywhere. And I think, I don't know, I'm just guessing that I think now that it's becoming more common knowledge that CSP is not about preventing exfiltration, that we just don't need to worry about it anymore, and we shouldn't spend our time doing it. We should focus on other things. And that's also kind of why I'm saying like script source is the only directive that actually matters. It's a little bit flippant there, but like it's technically true. If you look at like Google Photos, for example, they have the most modern CSP on the internet that I know of. They're using multiple headers. Each header is kind of enforcing a different version of CSP in a like beautifully backwards compatible way, using strict dynamic and nonces. seriously, it's the best policy on the internet. It's way better than GitHub. GitHub is a great CSP 3.0 policy. Google Photos is a great CSP 3. And I guess to talk about that a little bit more too is one of the problems with CSP 1, which is what GitHub uses, our script source is just a CDN. And that's great because it doesn't include eval, doesn't include inline scripts, doesn't include some third-party random site. And that works for us because we have incredibly strict control over that domain. We use sub-resource integrity to make sure files don't get swapped out. We make sure that old assets are deleted as soon as the new assets go in. And that works for us, and that gives us a good enough policy. But in the world of you don't run your own CDN, you want to include somebody else's JavaScript, you're really opening yourself up to someone pulling down an old version of jQuery and exploiting that. Or your assets get swapped underneath you, you have no control over it, you're in a real bad spot. And so Strict Dynamic was kind of built to fix that problem because, again, like what GitHub has is as secure as it gets in that sense, but that is not something that's easily repeated elsewhere. And Strict Dynamic is kind of like the 0 to CSP in sort of 30 minutes opportunity, where it's like, okay, we're loading scripts from all over the internet. We can't re-architect the application overnight. But if we add a nonce to the ones we know are supposed to be there, and then let them load resources if need be, then we can at least know that we're not downloading the internet. So it's a really cool technology, and it's their focus has been on stopping script execution and not exfiltration.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and I think that's to your point, right? That's the breakdown that we have with CSP is what the purpose behind it is, right? And I am posting a link to just the Strict Dynamic on V3 if people want to read more on that, because there's a lot of good info in there, and I'm sure we can't or we won't get into all of the specifics here today. But yeah, I've read way too many like security reports for CSP that consider exactly what you're saying, right? Like they just, hey, you should implement CSP, not realizing what it is that they're actually asking, and what the prevention, what the mechanisms actually do within CSP, as opposed to, hey, it's just something that I know I've got in my checklist and I just dropped in there, right? You could probably say that about most vulnerabilities. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I guess this would be a good time to pitch my TikTok account where I am evaluating other people's content security policies. I haven't actually done a video where I'm evaluating policies yet because I wanted to have some like educational content to it, so I'm not just like speaking to the 7 people who understand it. And I got to tell you, content creation is way harder than I thought it would be. Like actually just making these TikToks has been like, I feel like, I don't know how to use this thing. How do the kids do this? This is amazing. It just takes me like 3 times longer to do something that people can probably do a lot more quickly. So it's been a little bit of a hurdle there. But I did create one educational video. I do intend to start evaluating policies because to your point, Seth, like I think a scanner is mostly like, do you have a policy? And there are so many policies on the internet that are just, well, first of all, Google proved that 90% of them are mostly ineffective. But just like looking at them, it's like you've included everything in this policy. Like it serves no purpose whatsoever. All you're doing is adding like another 500K to like every request. And so that was kind of, I was going to poke fun at some of those. I was going to like, just kind of like just make fun of people's policies for no good reason at all, and just for fun.
Sweet. So what's your TikTok account then, as the kids say?
Script source none.
Script source none.
I'm proud of that name because could have been a lot worse, but I like that one. And then Jim Manico actually commented that script source none. If you understand CSP, it's a little bit of a joke because it just means like no JavaScript at all. Which you can't really do on the internet these days. But Jim Manico's consulting site has script source none because it's purely brochure. But it's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek, like it just isn't realistic, but it is the most secure.
Sweet. Well, I posted it up there for for any of the kids that happen to be watching our podcast today.
I've also been asked to post it to my Twitter account because some people don't have accounts and some people don't want to be on the TikTok.
Okay.
I'm not on TikTok. I get sent TikToks and I'm like, what is this? Delete. And it's not. It's just because I don't want to.
He doesn't have an account.
It's just kind of like
I'm okay being old at.
It's a little bit of a longer story there, in that like when I was younger, and AOL Instant Messenger was like the hot thing. Like people were talking to each other all the time. I was like, they have a phone. Can they just like call people if they want to talk to them? I didn't quite understand it. Yeah. And then I go to college and all of a sudden like everyone's busy. You can't just like call people up randomly. And everybody's on AOL Instant Messenger talking to each other. So I was like, oh man, I don't need this new technology. And I fell way behind. So I think from that day on, I was like, okay, Twitter, I'm on that thing. I'm talking to myself. Nobody's on this thing. And all of a sudden, like all of security is on Twitter. And it's like weird if you don't have a Twitter account. So I don't know if that's what's going to happen to TikTok, but if it does.
I've got you beat, man. Back right when Bitcoin had, and I mean the instant it came out, Rob Fuller, Mubix, he was adamant. He was like, Ken, buy Bitcoin. I'm telling you. And I was like, screw your monopoly money. This is so stupid. Like, what are you talking about, man? This is nonsense. Okay, I'm going to put money into this Bitcoin. Great. And I would have been a millionaire. I would have been a big legit multi-millionaire if I just put like $1,000 into it back then, So don't feel too bad. You didn't miss out the same way I did. So,
well, it's always fun when you can quantify decisions like that, right?
Yeah.
It's like, that only cost me like, a whole different type of trajectory, but whatever, no biggie.
Well, I remember GitHub did a stock buyback plan before they got acquired, and they sold it for X dollars a share. It was worth a little bit more once Microsoft acquired. So I participated in that buyback, and I was like, oh, I just threw away X amount of dollars, and I can quantify that. That hurts. But hindsight 2020, I couldn't see it coming. I actually did need the money, so it was helpful.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I mean, that's I mean, you can never. That's the point of that's life. You can never predict. Yeah. So, but I'm not gonna lie, man. I look back all the time and I'm like, oh, such a bad mistake.
I can't even touch my Bitcoin because it's illegal in Hawaii.
Are you serious? I did not know that. Oh wow, that's crazy.
So I have Bitcoin, but I can't do anything with it. It's just sitting there.
Speaking of Hawaii, before I forget, because this was a question somebody had, and this was a question I had, and Seth had. Well, maybe not Seth, because Seth doesn't know about it. But anyways, Infosec, a conference that occurs in Hawaii for security-minded folks and engineers. For those who can't see, because you're listening, Seth is flipping me off. Anyways, moving forward. So yeah, Infosec. What if any are the plans there?
So I took kind of I stepped back last year and kind of have been a little more on the sidelines. So I don't want to make any like announcements. I want to let the person who's running it do this a little more planned. But I will confirm that unless something happens, we are going to have an event this year. And we hope to bring the same magic back. And we hope that obviously that the pandemic is in an acceptable state, that hopefully things get better. We wouldn't put on a conference if we didn't think it would be safe for everyone, or if it's not allowed.
No Voltron or Pokemon variants or whatever.
Yeah. There's some pent up travel energy, I think, from some people. I know I've had a few people come out and visit and they're just like, Hawaii is the first place I wanted to go. And then, things got worse and then people started canceling trips. So we hope there's some pent up energy to come out to Hawaii, and we don't want people. It was never about coming out to Hawaii and snipping my ties all day, but actually putting together a good conference too. So we're still sticking to kind of our one track philosophy of just having everyone in the same room, having the same conversation. Bigger emphasis on being family friendly. We were always family friendly. The second year we even provided free daycare and activities for the kids. We're only going to keep growing that program bigger and bigger. Our diversity and inclusion program has, from year one, brought many people to the conference, and we hope that just continues to grow. And we just hope to see all of our friends that we haven't seen in a couple of years, and no way in hell we're doing another virtual conference.
Yeah.
Man, I got to tell you, I had such a great time with the family there. You guys did I even thought it was very thoughtful how you guys had different colors on people's badges, like, yes, approach me. No, I'll approach you. Stuff like that. Like you said, you guys did daycare. You folks did daycare. I mean, the one track I think is the best. Okay, so for what it's worth, I love the one track because, like you said, everybody's concentrated in that moment on that speaker and that one topic. And then all the conversation that happens afterwards, whether it's online or during online or, in person, it's not what track did you go to? This is what conversation you're going to have. It was awesome. Like, I have to say, Locomoco Sec was the last conference I went to that was my favorite, and I cannot wait to go back. So, man, I'm very excited for you all to host that again. And again, Seth,
I'm excited to come.
It happens in Hawaii.
Blah, 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 blah. Yes. Yes. It's on my radar. I might forget about it. You might have to remind me again, but we'll watch for it.
Hawaii's an island, a set of islands, by the way. I just want to make sure you're.
Wait, what? Yeah. I thought it was in New York, right? Anyway, well, cool. I do need to jump off. But Neil, we appreciate the time, we appreciate the explanations and the opinions, and spending an hour and a half with you. It's been enjoyable. So thanks for coming on. Let us know how things move for you going forward, right? Like where you end up, and best of luck in the process, because that's always difficult.
Thank you, and you'll probably hear about it on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm sure. Or TikTok. Yeah. Cool.
Mitch, did we give Neil's Twitter account? I think it's just MDM, right? Okay.
Yeah, it's just MDM.
Yep.
Okay.
I dropped it in there. So
November, December, whatever M stands for, Boxy, whatever. NDM.
Okay. It's my initials.
Yeah. Cool.
Sweet. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining today. We'll catch up at next week. So
see you.